Hi there, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to the third, or I guess second, actually, in our series of ongoing informational sessions about the opioid abatement, Boulder County opioid abatement release for applications. I am going to have our team introduce ourselves first and foremost, and then have our interpreter say a few words about how to select translation during today's presentation. So my name is Kelly Veit. I am a Boulder County Community Services Program Manager, and I am helping to distribute the opioid abatement funds. So I'll pass it over to Tucker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tucker Yerman. I support the distribution of opioid settlement dollars with Boulder County with Kelly and our other teammate, Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan Buggard. I'm the opioid contract administrator here at Boulder County. I help support creating the funding agreements with the awardees on that end of the process.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jeanette, and I am one of the interpreters on this meeting today. My other partner, his name is Martin, and I just want to thank the organizers of this event for their commitment to language justice. Language justice means that all people have the right to speak and be heard in the language of their heart. Therefore, this meeting will be interpreted in English and Spanish simultaneously. Once I finish speaking, we will turn on the interpretation function at that time. Please choose your preferred language on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen by pressing the interpretation icon and click Mute Original Audio. And please remember to speak at a conversational pace so that I am able to provide an accurate rendition of your message. Thank you. Bienvenidos, mi nombre es Janet, seré su intérprete con mi compañero Martín el día de hoy. Quiero agradecer a los organizadores de este evento por su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje. La justicia del lenguaje significa que todas las personas tienen el derecho a hablar y ser escuchadas en el idioma de su corazón. Entonces, esta reunión será interpretada en inglés y en español simultáneamente. Una vez que termine de hablar, se activará la función de interpretación. En ese momento, elija su idioma preferido en la barra de herramientas en la parte inferior de su pantalla de Zoom, presionando el icono de interpretación y haga clic en Mute Original Audio. Recuerde hablar a un ritmo de conversación para que pueda brindar una interpretación precisa de su mensaje. Muchas gracias.
Awesome. Thank you. Tucker, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, and then you can just pass it over to me? All right, awesome. So again, welcome everyone. So today might be a little bit of repeat for folks who were able to join us either in our recent presentation to the Substance Use Advisory Group or to our former kickoff presentation that was on the 12th. But essentially, we will be covering, whoops, moving too quickly. We'll be covering a little bit of the background information of the funding opportunity itself, kind of the basics, the nuts and bolts. I will be handing it off then to Tucker, who's going to talk a little bit through some of the questions that we've already fielded either through email or in those previous presentations. We also have a Google form that'll be linked throughout this process for folks to leave any questions that they have. So we've pulled any of the questions we've already received there to kind of get you the most up-to-date information on what we're seeing come through in terms of inquiries. So to get us started, let's go here. All right, so whoops, sorry, I have bad
Kelly,
Wi-Fi
before you jump in, let me pull this down. I just need to add Janet this back in as an interpreter. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
When I had my screen shared, it wasn't letting me access that page. Okay. Sorry, folks. Okay, Janet, you should be added. Okay, Kelly, go for it.
Awesome. Okay. Let me go back to this first slide. All right, so some of the basics. So this funding opportunity did open on the 15th of August. We are funding across 4 major focus areas with actually 16 strategic approaches that we are funding within each of those. So the 4 focus areas are prevention and education, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. We are offering 2-year awards with $150,000 max award per year. So if you submit the 2-year award, the maximum you can submit for is $300,000. But we do ask that those budgets are annualized to cap at $150,000 per year. Eligible entities, we're hoping to cast sort of a wide net here with broad eligibility. So nonprofits and non-governmental organizations are eligible, as well as for-profits and private LLCs, educational institutions, and government entities. Some additional eligibility information. So applicants must be providing services or actually engaging in the activities that are related to Boulder County's strategic plan. So those 4 main focus areas, as well as the 16 funded strategies underneath them, they must actually be doing that work, of course. Entities must also be able to provide or participate in evaluation of their proposed programming. And while applicants do not need to reside in Boulder County, the agencies don't need to be based in Boulder County. However, the program services related to opioid abatement funding must be primarily provided within Boulder County for Boulder County community members. All right, so a couple more details about the application process. It is an online application through foundant.com. Which Jordan's going to walk through a little bit more in detail later. So what this will look like when you go on is that you may select one of your focus areas, one of those 4 focus areas, and then the goal area within that you are applying to. Within that goal, it will also expand any number of strategies or approaches. You can select as many of those strategies or approaches that you would be committing to through submission of this application. You may also submit multiple applications if you're applying for different focus areas or different goals within the same focus area. But we do want those applications to be significantly different. So if you're submitting different applications, they should be for distinct programs with a unique budget and unique scopes of work. So for example, submitting an application where you're maybe splitting an FTE's role between, some harm reduction and some prevention activities, but it's essentially the same program and the same role, that is not eligible. We do want different applications to be distinct in their programming. And then we do recognize that some areas within the strategic plan have natural overlap. For example, prevention and harm reduction, we do honor that most programs sort of do a little bit of both. And some of the programming that you might be applying for funding on might span these different focus areas. And so we do just ask that you make sort of your best guess of what is the bulk of your programming, what category would that best fall into among those 4 focus areas and their subsequent goals. And then a note about treatment and what we are and are not funding in this particular funding round or in treatment. So for this particular request for application, funds may be used for levels 1 and level 2 in the American Society of Addiction Medicine criteria on the continuum of care for adult addiction treatment. What that essentially means, and that link will show you a visual of that tiered sort of approach to acuity level for treatment services. But what that essentially means is we are funding lower acuity, mostly outpatient services. So things like MAT expansion or expanding therapy services. The treatment services that are not eligible for this funding round are more in that higher acuity space, such as, for example, a medically managed inpatient or residential treatment facility. They're not eligible in this particular round because these are much more specialized or technical in scope, really reaching out to very specific vendors who can commit to these activities. They are a little bit higher cost, and because of some of these particularities and technical aspects, they are better suited for a different funding and contracting route with the county called a request for proposal. So we're looking at a later time and date where we might be framing a request for proposal for more technical interventions such as those higher treatment levels. And then finally, what are we looking at when we receive our applications? So we're looking across a couple different domains. The first is cultural responsiveness and commitment to racial equity. The second is need, timeline, outcomes, and evaluation. The third is population focus, so making sure that if a particular strategic approach or a program is intended to specifically reach a priority population, that applicants are explaining to us coherently how they would do that, how they would evaluate that sort of approach. And then the funding request, so just making sure that the funding that is requested seems reasonable in terms of the programming that the applicant is committing to. So with that, Tucker, if you want to take back control and dive into some of the questions we've had so far.
Yes. So we hosted a question and answer and introduction to the strategic plan earlier this month on August 12th before the RFA opened. We also have opened a question and answer form that I'll drop into the chat. You can use this form at any point to shoot us a question, and we will do our best to answer it as quickly as possible. And we also will be collecting all questions and all answers from past meetings, from this form, from this meeting and future meetings, and assembling them all into a central document so that you can go through on our website and find any question that any applicant or potential applicant has asked. So right now, I'll go through the questions that we've already received from our first meeting and from the form. Jordan will walk through a couple points about actually using the Found in application, and then we will open it up for question and answer from all of you. So we had, I see your question in the chat, Allison. It currently is with our communications team, and they should be posting it to our website very shortly. So I'll put some heat on them to get it up as quickly as possible. But everything that is in that central document will be answered right now. So just a second. So we had one question about funding decisions. We're expecting funding decisions to be announced in November, and it can take up to 8 weeks for the funding agreement and contracting process. So the question was, when should applicants plan to begin working on the scope of work in the contract? And so services identified within an individual scope of work may not begin until the funding agreement has been fully executed, which means the funding agreement has been signed by all parties. So we don't want to get into a situation where programs are beginning work prior to their funding agreement being completed. How much total funding is available for this funding round, and what will be reserved for that future RFP that Kelly mentioned? So the funding amount for this request for application is estimated to be roughly $1.7 million. However, this number may increase slightly. There currently is no identified amount reserved for a future request for proposal. Additional planning will be undertaken to determine specific services related to community need and associated costs. Some of these community needs and subsequent requests for proposals will likely depend on what areas are successfully addressed through awards from this funding round and where there are still gaps we would like to fill.
And Tucker, can I jump in on that
Sure.
last one just to give a little bit more about the timeline? So one of the reasons we don't have a dollar amount for a future request for proposal is just the timeline that we can draw down our funds on an annual basis from the state. So the last opportunity that we have to draw down any funds we're eligible for this year would actually be March of next year. And then the following September of 2025 is when we can draw down our additional funds for that year. So there's two opportunities that are forthcoming that'll give us a little bit more clarity on not only what do we still need based on the responses across this request for application, but then how much money do we actually still have left to play with to potentially host more of these tailored requests for proposals. So there'll be more information about that early in the new year.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. We had a question if other counties in Colorado are offering similar grants, specifically Denver County. Other opioid abatement regions may offer similar grant opportunities, but each region establishes its own mechanism for distributing their regional funding. So I will put in the chat the Attorney General's website for regional opioid abatement. On that website, you can find contacts for each region and reach out to them to identify if there are other funding opportunities within different regions. We had a specific program question. So this particular program trains workplace managers and leaders about how to support their employees who are in recovery. And they were asking which strategic approach would they apply for. After review, we feel like this program would best fit using the recovery services approach within the recovery focus area. Sorry, there's a slight typo on this slide, so we'll address that. But the recovery focus area and the recovery services goal, the recovery services approach within the goal area in the recovery focus area. You know, it's a lot of jargon. So if there's additional questions, please feel free to reach out. If an organization applies for a certain dollar amount, is it only a yes or no decision for that dollar amount, or does the Boulder County Region Opioid Council negotiate final award amounts? So the Boulder County Region Opioid Council may negotiate award amounts with programs, including funding partial program activities. However, any final award amount will be limited by the maximum award of $300,000 within a 2-year period, with no more than $150,000 awarded per year. Many organizations have been impacted by the changes to the naloxone bulk purchase fund. Is there an opportunity for a collective application? So the Boulder County Region Opioid Council is exploring the potential for direct funding certain strategies. Naloxone distribution may be a strategy identified for direct funding. If the Boulder County Region Opioid Council decides to directly fund naloxone distribution, they will provide the funding to a lead agency with funding requirements around partnering with other community agencies to broadly distribute naloxone. So we recently had a decision by the council to approve allocating some funds towards our harm reduction strategies, which includes naloxone distribution. So we will be going through and identifying the specifics around which strategies are receiving funding, and in particular, the naloxone distribution to hopefully fill some gaps being left through funding shortages from the bulk fund. So more information about naloxone in particular will be coming out soon.
And I want to jump in on this one too, because I know there have been a lot of questions in this space. So Tucker had a perfect answer when this question came up in our last session, which was, you know, it might be worth holding on to see if a partnership with this lead agency would help your organization distribute naloxone before applying, if the majority of your application has to do with naloxone distribution. However, if distributing naloxone is just one of many activities that you will be doing under an application, we would still strongly encourage you to submit that application, because the funding amount that would go to this lead agency with requirements to partner with other agencies, it's still going to be a relatively small amount. So it will be supplemental and really, again, aiming to kind of fill that regional need and the gaps that are happening around the bulk purchase fund. But if you have many other activities tied to your master kind of application, please do still apply.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So this question, my organization's program focuses on mobilizing impacted families to support legislature and public policy change. Which strategic approach would this fall under? After review, we've determined that this program is not allowable for use of these funds as it involves advocating for legislature and public policy. So there is more information about the approved uses for these funds and disapproved uses for these funds in the request for application guide. So that is linked on our website. So take a look at the website for more information about approved uses and unapproved uses. And we've identified that this particular program would not be allowable for these funds. My question, my organization has a fiscal agent. Am I still able to apply? And fiscal agents are allowed, but we'd ask that you make a note in your application. There are a number of different areas where you can provide some narrative explanation. So find us a spot to include that you do have a fiscal agent. The funding agreement itself would go under the fiscal agent's name, with language indicating that you are the individual implementing the actual programming. Are partnerships encouraged? Yes, partnerships are encouraged. There are details about partnerships in the RFA guide. So take a look there for more information about applying as partners. There was a question about accessing. We have additional Q&A sessions in September, and you can find all of this information on the webpage that I dropped into the chat. There are 3 virtual assistance sessions in September, and the link for those is the same for all 3, and pre-registration is not required. So you can find that information and those links on our website. We had a question about starting the application on or after the 15th prior to attending these technical assistance sessions. And you are able to start the RFA, or you're able to start your application now that it's open, and Foundant does allow you to save your progress and return later. So if you do start and you run into some questions that pop up, you're able to save your progress and then either send us a direct email, send us a question through that Microsoft form, or attend one of our assistance sessions and we can walk through the issues you're running into directly. Okay, and I'm going to pass it over to Jordan, who's going to go through these couple questions.
Hello, thank you, Tucker. So we received a question that was, my team and I are trying to create an account in Foundant to apply for funding, but we're unable to make a new account because an account was already registered to their agency through the tax ID number. So they were asking if I could help troubleshoot that and or get their own login. They were also planning on submitting 2 separate applications for 2 different programs within the agency, and so we're looking to have 2 separate accounts. I'm able to go in on the back end and add a new user to an organization. So if this is something that comes up for anybody else, feel free to reach out and I will get you added. Then you should receive an email that an account has been created for you. We will assign you a temporary password, and then the first time you log in, Foundant is going to prompt you to reset it. And then any program names, or if 2 different folks are submitting an application for one organization, you'll include the specific program name and details in the application in order for us to differentiate between the 2. All right, go to the next slide. Or do I have control? No, okay. There was a follow-up question with that one that they wanted to add a general email as users and replace their personal work email addresses, trying to make sure that other folks on their team have access to it when they aren't available and that their supervisor can check in on the application using the shared email address. And so when you go into Foundant, into an applicant page, you can edit your email and username by clicking on your name in the upper right hand corner of the screen. There's a button to select edit my profile, and then it will bring you to a page where you can change the email / username that's associated with the account. I did also include a hyperlink when these get posted to the website that you'll be able to click this edit my profile here within the slide. That'll bring you to a Tango that walks you through how to get to the edit my profile as well and what options you have to change in there. Next slide, please. All right, and then I just wanted to give another little overview of what the Foundant application looks like when you get inside there. There's a couple other applications that are open right now. We share this software with the City of Boulder, Longmont, and Lafayette. And so right now there is for sure at least another Boulder County one open for another couple days. Worthy Cause closes at the end of this week. You'll also see the City of Boulder's Human Services Fund open on there for about another month. And so when you go get into the main application page and it's showing you all of the different options, make sure you're either putting in the search bar at the top opioid so that it comes right up, or you can scroll down until you see this page is what it's going to look like. And there's the apply button in the upper right hand corner. All of the important dates and links that you will need for the application are going to be included here. We have our request for applications guide, our question form. There is a registration link for this Q&A for today, which we'll take down now that this has occurred, but our recording from the first time, this time, and all of our technical sessions will then also be available on the web page that's linked. And then it does give you the link for our technical assistance, which again, you don't have to pre-register for, the time and all of those dates. And so make sure that you read the full RFA guide before you get in there. And I believe Kelly put in the chat as well, but just to reiterate too that the question form does officially close on September 12th, but you can continue to email us or other ways that are available to ask questions. So just because the form closes doesn't mean questions stop. I think I have one more slide if you want to go to the next one. Okay, and then once you get inside, this is kind of what it's going to look like from the applicant view. And so there is also an FAQ at the back of our RFA guide for how to copy your answers if you are planning on submitting 2 separate applications so that you can save some time on re-entering some of those details that stay the same across the application, like the agency and contact information. On this main page, you'll see which process that you're in, and so you can double check before getting in there that you're in the 2025 opioid settlement funds. It's going to give you your applicant information. So again, this is a good time to check and make sure that all of that is correct for you and your organization. If it isn't, you can go up into that upper right hand corner and edit it. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, I think this is my last slide now. Okay, so then, and you scroll down, you're still inside that first application page. I just couldn't fit it all on one slide. It gives you a reminder for your due date. The first question you're going to see is our acknowledgement. It's again going to prompt you for that RFA guide. And we are asking for an acknowledgement that you've read that to make sure that folks are really understanding going into the application and not wasting time by getting halfway through and then realizing that maybe their program doesn't apply, that sort of thing. There are also options at the bottom for if you do decide to withdraw your application for some reason, you can abandon the request, you can save your application to come back to later, and then there's also the submit question, of course. If you'd like to take a peek at what the questions are prior to really digging into the application, we do have them listed out in our RFA guide, which you'll see when you review. But in another option is that when you're in this main page up in the upper right hand corner, there's a option to press question list here, and that will auto generate a PDF with all of the included questions there as well, so you can kind of know what you're getting into before you get too deep. And that, I believe, is what I have for slides today on Foundant. So I will kick it back to Tucker and Kelly for now.
Yeah, and this is just a closing, we've mentioned this a few times today, but as you have questions come out, if we have not answered them yet, or you start diving into the application and get kind of lost or confused on anything, please feel free to reach out. Both of our emails are there, and there is a link and a CAPTCHA, both of which will take you to that Google form we mentioned, which is open until the 12th. So with that, I think we can open it to questions.
You're welcome to drop any questions in the chat, or also feel free to raise your hand, and we'll call on people individually to go ahead and add their question into the space.
I have a question.
Go for it, Avani.
Okay, thank you. So my question is that if we are currently doing activities through the opioid settlement fund, like, will they get interrupted potentially, or is it okay if we keep them going?
So for the currently funded programs, their funding is set to be done at the end of 2024. So if you're basically reapplying to have those same services just re-up for funding, it would be, we're aiming for that funding to start in the new year. So if there is an interruption, I would believe it would be short. But again, the reason we're trying to push this as quickly as we can in this last quarter of the year is that we are aiming to have those funds starting to come out very shortly in the new year, which would essentially create no gap between currently funded programs and future funding.
Right. Thank you.
I want to note on that one too, just from the contracting end, that in terms of creating our use and funds and our funding agreement, we have our template ready to go. And the uses funds is mostly going to be created from the scope of work that you provide within the application. And so ideally our contracting process should go fairly quickly and smoothly, as long as everybody remains in touch and it's kind of like staying on top of the emails and whatnot. I know with the holiday season, and it's going to fall over that it will be tough for some folks at some times, but we're hopeful that with getting those announcements out in November prior to Thanksgiving, that we will be able to get everybody's funding in place by January 1st, pending any abnormal situations that could come up.
Christina, I saw your hand up next.
Hi, thank you. So I have a question about the prevention and education strategic area. So in the program plan, you have identified the target populations and equity focus on youth, unhoused individuals, and older adults. And I don't see any mention there specifically on like ethnic minorities or racial inclusion. But then in the consideration criteria, it looks like there's going to be a strong emphasis on cultural responsiveness and racial equity. So my question is that my organization is primarily serving the student population of Boulder County, so that demographic may not have really a strong pronounced racial component. So wondering how we might effectively make a case for our focus, but still align with the criteria for cultural responsiveness and racial equity.
Yeah, I mean, I think so for us, that's why we had sort of making an emphasis on any programming, doing additional outreach or inclusion to really engage BIPOC communities. That's just kind of across the board for every app, for every single strategy. So recognizing that certain programs might not reach certain populations due to whatever institution they might be operating in or the strategy itself. We did identify kind of those subpopulations, I shouldn't say subpopulations, like priority populations within those sub activities or that kind of strategy level. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it seems like your particular program would fill that need of reaching out to that priority population of the youth population. So I think that would be what you would want to speak to. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we
Okay.
definitely have a youth focus, just not necessarily like a concerted effort on like ethnic or BIPOC outreach. So just wondering if that would be eligible for funding or if that's something we'd want to build out.
It is something that's eligible for funding, and I think it is something that you'd want to build out. So I think it's sort of both, and we do want to see where our community and our interventions are in terms of the populations that they're serving. And again, this is really to incentivize sort of that broader lens of recognizing the most impacted populations and historically kind of excluded from services. And so we're doing our best to kind of do a both and, where we want to challenge organizations, especially if they're receiving these funds, to have foresight and strategic thinking about how to reach particular populations. And again, we recognize that due to certain interventions or certain focused populations, you might be reaching out to other communities that are also impacted, such as youth, on a higher basis. And so please speak to that, please apply, and also please, yeah, definitely be forward thinking about how to do additional outreach to BIPOC communities.
Okay, thank you.
Adriana, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Hi, Tucker. Nice to see you again. Hi, everyone. Well, my question is very similar. Like I run the Spanish group for the community reinforcement and family training, and the families have requested like many options and activities for their youth and the family themselves. So I was wondering if I can apply for, because the craft groups are already funded by the Behavioral Health Administration. But like if we want to expand the outreach and having more activities for families and youth to that will support the recovery process, is something that we can apply with this fund.
Yeah, because it's kind of it's a totally different arm of prevention and education within that program. So if it's something that doesn't currently exist and you're kind of expanding your outreach and your prevention activities, then yeah.
Okay. And if I have more specific question, I can reach out to you, right? Okay. Thank you.
Are there other questions? And I recognize we're at the opening of this RFA period, so a lot of our questions right now have to do with, would my program be eligible or whatnot. But as we progress in this and folks do look at that founding application, please feel free to contact us with any technical questions also about how to navigate that application process. So we're here to help on anything. All right.
I was going to say, Tucker or Kelly, do you maybe just want to talk through the questions that were in the chat? Looks like there's
Sure.
been
Let me scroll back up here. Let's see. So there was a question around the naloxone decision, and will it be prior to the October 10th deadline? Yes, absolutely. We actually were trying to get this decision pushed through for a couple of months now, so we were unfortunately not able to get it decided on prior to the RFA going live. So the council did just approve as of Friday afternoon, Friday at 5 o'clock, that they would put forward some funding for naloxone distribution, and that it would go to a lead agency, likely the Works, and that agency would then also be required to partner with other community-based organizations to distribute these funds. So that's really what we have in mind in terms of the general scope of work. However, we are going to be fine-tuning what that scope of work for this recipient would look like in our September council meeting. So there will be more details forthcoming. All to say, I will repeat, like if you have an application that's maybe 10% naloxone distribution and a whole host of other activities kind of plugged into that, I would strongly encourage you to apply, because the funding that we're talking about giving to this agency would really be supplemental, trying to kind of spread and broaden the distribution of these harm reduction supplies, but it will not be enough. And so I recognize that a lot of folks sort of have a tiered approach in harm reduction. They might be doing naloxone distribution among a host of other activities. I would still encourage you to submit that application. And then I'm scrolling down. Letters of support. There was a question about what letters of support should look like, or where folks could indicate their partnership commitments with other agencies. And letters of support for this application are completely optional. So yes, they look great. It's wonderful to hear. And if you wanted to indicate any partnerships that you all are doing in collaborations with your funding, you can mention those either in a letter of support or just in the narrative of your application. But we do really encourage you to call those collaborations forward so that we can see that there's sort of a broader application of the funds that we would potentially be awarding that applicant. And let's see.
Kelly, I just wanted to jump
Yes.
in. I do see that there are a number of folks on this call representing programs that have received opioid settlement dollars from us in the past. And I just want to remind all of those representatives that even if you are currently receiving funding through the opioid settlement dollars and through Boulder County through that avenue, you do have to apply for 2025 and ongoing funding. So all funding agreements will end on December 31st of this year. So you do have to apply for ongoing funding. And there also is no guarantee that if you have received funding through the opioid settlement dollars in the past, that you will receive additional opioid settlement dollars. And we did receive one chat question way at the beginning, asking when the central document of FAQs will be posted. And I think I did answer that live, but just as a reminder, Jordan and I are capturing all the questions, both in the chat and that are being asked, adding them to the central document. And as soon as possible, we'll get them over to the folks that control the website of things. So in the next couple days, we should hope that all questions will be listed and up online.
I was just looking at the website before this, and the slides and the document aren't up there, but the recordings of our sessions are, so you can still watch those to get some of those questions too if you don't have the time to wait, perchance.
All right. Last call, questions going once. All right. Seeing no more questions or hands or anything coming through in the chat. Thank you all again for joining us today. And as we mentioned a few times, there's many avenues to keep engaging us along the way. Those sessions in September are open, as well as the Google form. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you, everyone. Take care.